Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and I bought 3 of the cheapest laptops on Amazon. They're all around £200, about $250, and they're all, well, as you'd probably expect, not the best laptops I've ever reviewed. And actually one of them I would definitely not recommend, but probably not the one you're thinking. So starting from over here, we have this 14-inch, and I don't even know what this brand is. It's some Chinese company I've never heard of. Is that Auzda. Then we have this, another 14-inch, an Asus, which I've definitely heard of before, VivoBook. And then finally over here, we actually have a Chromebook. This is running Chrome OS, and it is another Asus. It's the Chromebook Flip. All 14 inches, all around £200, all with pretty terrible specs. But for students, or the office, or if you're simply on a really tight budget and don't particularly care about fancy screens or tons of performance, are any of these actually worth buying, or do you need to spend more? And if you do find this video helpful, a cheeky little subscribe would be lovely. Now, obviously being ultra budget laptops, we're looking at some pretty plasticky builds. We've got 1080p screens across the board and some questionable viewing angles, and also some very stiff screen hinges, and they're all running pretty low-end Intel Celeron processors. I know, I felt sick just saying that. However, while these are all meant for casual work, a bit of browsing, some video streaming, and maybe a little bit of photo work, what actually really surprised me is how the day-to-day experience of using these 3 couldn't have felt more different. Which goes to show it really is worth picking your laptop carefully. Let's start with the 2 Windows laptops. And I have to say, this guy was just a bit of a punt for me. I really had no idea of this brand. I didn't really have any expectations, and I figured I'd give this a damn good thrashing in this comparison. But actually, I really like this, and in many ways, it's a lot better than the Asus. And actually, they are at a similar price, and that's despite having what I can only describe as a almost Comic Sans logo on the back here, which doesn't scream premium, but everything else I've been pleasantly surprised. And as I say, the only reason I actually picked this is because the reviews were pretty good and the price was in line with these 2. To give you an idea, in terms of performance, the Auzda packs in double the number of CPU cores. We also have twice the RAM, 8GB versus a measly 4GB, and 4 times the storage, 256 versus 64. You can get models with more, but again, for the similar price, this is much better value. And actually, the storage itself is much faster, like about 80% faster, as it's using an M2 SATA rather than a very slow eMMC kind of storage. Don't worry if that doesn't mean anything to you. Basically, this is just faster in pretty much every way. Plus, you can expand the storage by up to 1 terabyte by adding a second M2 SATA SSD via this little panel underneath. Not too shabby. And as a result, there is a big difference in how these feel to use. The Asus can be frustratingly slow, and while the Auzda's CPU is only about a third quicker in multi-core and roughly the same in single-core performance, it does still feel much quicker, and the extra storage is a nice bonus. However, by far the fastest and most responsive and just nicest to use was the Chromebook Flip, which surprisingly does use very similar Intel Celeron processors, but because it's running Chrome OS, which is a much lighter, much simpler operating system, it's not as heavy as Windows 11, everything is just more efficient, more streamlined, and much more pleasurable to use. It's just a nicer experience. The good news though is all 3 laptops were pretty reliable. I didn't experience any crashes or driver issues, but in terms of everyday performance and the one which made me want to tear my hair out the least, it's definitely a win for the Chromebook. These do have the same screen size. It's just literally the smaller bezels which make this a whole lot more compact, which is always a positive, especially for a smaller laptop that you may be carrying around all day. And I also do appreciate the top firing speakers here, so they sound a little bit less rubbish than the other ones. So I think in terms of being the most compact, it's a win for this guy, but if we come over here back to the Chromebook, I do like this glossy screen, and also we have this flush glass bezel, unlike these slightly protruding plasticky matte bezels that we have on these guys. I think the Chromebook, this Asus Chromebook, does look the smartest, but it is a bit heavier and not the most compact. And this guy has a bit of an ace up its sleeve because they don't call it the Chromebook Flip for nothing. It has a 360-degree hinge, which means you can spin it right around and use it as a tablet. Of course, it means we also have a touchscreen here, and also you can use it in tent mode, which I quite like for watching videos and movies and things. Although I'm not sure who actually uses it in this mode, but you have the option, or of course, just a regular clamshell laptop. For literal flexibility, it's a win for the Chromebook. Sticking with the Chromebook for a moment, and if you are coming from an older Windows laptop, then Chrome OS will be the biggest difference to consider. Chrome OS is Google's Android-based interface, which is designed to run on lower power hardware with the Google ecosystem and the Chrome browser at its heart. That means it gets their suite of Office apps like Google Docs and Sheets built in, and it's all synced with your Google One cloud storage. Plus, it does run some Android apps and games, although I did find a fair few weren't compatible or they just ran in a smartphone-sized window. But setup is easy, and it took less than 5 minutes, and this doesn't feel like a budget experience. So it's a tough one. I would say unless you do need a particular app or program that will only run on Windows, or if you're connecting to some sort of office or school server or system that again only uses Windows, then you may be limited to a Windows 11 device like this. Or indeed, if you're just used to using it and perhaps you're giving it to a parent perhaps who doesn't want to try something new, then again, probably your safest option. But I think if you're happy to give it a go, for this kind of price range of laptops, I would definitely consider a Chromebook like this. And if anything, it's actually simpler to use than a Windows machine. Let's talk about these screens. And while they all share a similar size 14-inch display, the quality is not the same between them. I would say this guy, the Ausda, I'm definitely gonna have to figure out how to say that, and the Chromebook over here are my favorites. I do quite like this glossy screen on the Chromebook, although the downside of that is it will pick up reflections a lot more easily. But in terms of viewing angles, this is a definite win over here. I mean, just look at it compared to this VivoBook, which is just horrible. From pretty much every angle except straight on, it looks awful. It's dark, it's dim, it's not a touchscreen unlike the Chromebook. I kind of just hate it. Everything's washed out, and considering the display is what you're looking at the whole time when you're using a laptop, I think it's pretty important. And so for me, that's a big issue with this VivoBook and why I would go for one of these two instead. Both of these also offer 250 nits of brightness, which is okay, but it's not that bright, and you will struggle to see them outdoors. But thanks to all three sharing a 1080p resolution, image sharpness looks identical between them. As you would expect, all three of these laptops have pretty basic keyboards, which means cheaper, rough textured plastic keycaps with no backlighting and a slightly clacky feel. It's a close one, but I would say the Asus VivoBook just about wins here, followed by the Chromebook, with the Ausda feeling a bit cramped and the cheapest. And I also can't stand this rough feeling trackpad. It actually kind of feels unpleasant to use after a couple of minutes. It's pretty obvious this is one area that Ausda have saved some money compared to the smooth glass trackpads on both the Asus machines here. When it comes to ports, aka connectivity, this is another area the Ausda has cut costs, and it's a shame that it doesn't even offer a USB-C port. So I think here the Chromebook wins, as it's the only one with Wi-Fi 6. It has two USB 3.2s which support power delivery and display out, and we do also get a micro SD card reader, although in favor of the VivoBook we do have an HDMI port. But what about battery life? Well, after 6 hours of my standard full screen video test, the Ausda had run out of power completely. Not great. The VivoBook, with its slightly lower powered processor, managed just under 9 hours, but it was the Chromebook that absolutely smashed this test, lasting over 13 hours. And in general use, this thing is going to easily last you a full day, whereas the other two, you may have to bring your chargers with you. You're probably wondering, how am I playing Baldur's Gate 3 on this laptop? Well, this laptop isn't really running it. I'm streaming this through GeForce Now, which really is the only way of gaming on any of these laptops, particularly the Windows ones I've got back here. Obviously with an Intel Celeron processor, unless you're playing Age of Empires 2 on low settings, you're not really going to run anything natively on the laptop, so your best bet is to stream. GeForce Now, Xbox Cloud, and it actually works really well. Obviously you do need a fast and reliable internet connection, and also with Chromebooks specifically, you do have access to some Android apps as well. They don't all work extremely well, but it's a nice extra option to have. The thing is though, even if you are just spending a couple £100, it is still a couple hundred of your well-earned pounds, and warranty and support is an important thing to consider. And obviously with a no-name brand like this, while you can rely on the retailer's return policy, I bought this from Amazon for about £200, it's actually currently on a deal, you'll have that 30-day return policy, but beyond that, I'm not overly confident you're going to have a ton of support or warranty from Ausda. They do actually have a little email that they include in the box which you could reach out to, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that. So that is one reason you may want to pay a little bit more for a better known brand that has global warranties and better support, or at least a better track record. So yes, this is cheaper for the specs, but there is a compromise in that regard. As for the webcam, well, they're all pretty ropey to be honest, and I would definitely recommend buying a separate external webcam and plugging it in via USB. You'll get much better quality, but between the three inbuilt cameras, definitely a win for the Chromebook. Much wider field of view, a higher frame rate. It looks quite a bit nicer than these two. And the VivoBook isn't even HD, it's 480p. It's a VGA webcam, which is pretty unforgivable in this day and age. So between the three, Chromebook wins, but they're all kind of terrible. Okay, let's wrap this up. Which one of these three would I actually buy? Well, I reckon this one. Yes, it doesn't have those Windows apps and programs, and that may be a deal breaker for you, but at this price point, around £200, $250 there-ish, I reckon a Chrome OS, a Chromebook like this is your best bet. These are okay. I think between them, I would definitely go with the Uzda, which kind of surprised me. I thought this was going to be terrible because I've never heard of it, but actually the specs, the compact design, it's much nicer to use than this, albeit it does obviously lack that sort of support and warranty. I think the VivoBook is... No, I was going to say okay. I can't recommend this. It's pretty rubbish. It's also been out for nearly a year now, so we may have an updated version soon. But I think my takeaway would be, if you can stretch your budget to maybe £400-ish, then you've got much better options for Windows laptops, much more capable machines. But at this price point, while none of them are terrible, I would get myself a Chromebook. So for me, it's 1, 2, 3. But what do you reckon? Which one of these would you go for if you had a couple of £100 to spend? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed the video and want more laptop reviews from me. And I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat. Bush. It's my script. Don't look at that. Stop it.